Hey everyone, my name's Christy. Welcome to my corner. Thank you all so much for joining me today on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, for a talk about embroidery hoops. But before we get to that, I want to welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for joining me on my crafty and artistic adventures. And welcome back everyone who's been hanging out with me for the past weeks, months, however long you've been with me. It's been really nice to get to know you in the comments here on YouTube and also on Instagram. And if you are not following me on Instagram, you can find me at Dr._Christy. I'll put that right here. And I post pictures of my works in progress during the week. I post pictures of cooking and baking that I don't film and the ones that I do film. I post pictures of my dog. I post pictures of teaching and history and kind of my life. So if you're interested, Dr._Christy. I have two main categories of hoops, and those are my working hoops, which are kind of more heavy duty, keep really good tension hoops. And then I have my framing hoops, which are hoops that I paint and frame my pieces in, because in embroidery, more so than in cross stitch these days, we frame in a hoop. And so you have like a hoop wall. Whereas I've been seeing that most cross stitchers frame their stuff or finish their stuff in frames or like flat pieces or into like objects, right? In a way that embroiderers don't really do very much. And I do think it has to do with those kinds of fabric, but I'll talk about fabric in a different video. But I want to add to that a third category of hoops that I just don't use. Like I bought them to test to see if they'd be good working hoops, and they just didn't make the cut. And I kept them anyway because I like hoops and I like collecting embroidery supplies, right? That's why I have like 100,000 scissors. The nice thing about embroidery is that in general, the supplies are relatively inexpensive. So I think my most expensive hoop is $8. And you know, you're not going to buy 100 of those, but buying one or two of those won't usually break the bank. So I want to talk first about my working hoops, and then I'm going to talk about my framing hoops. And then I want to talk about wrapped hoops, because you may have seen some people recommend wrapping your hoop. And I want to talk about that and why when that's good and when that's maybe not so good. So let's talk about working hoops. I have wooden working hoops and plastic working hoops. And I will put links to all the hoops I actually use down below. The other hoops, I'm not going to put links to. If you want to try them out, you're welcome to try them out, but I'm not going to post links to them. And I get my hoops from all different places. And some of them are widely available. Some of them you have to get online. My wooden working hoops are nice, solid wood with these very thick brass fittings. And I have two different brands that I like. These are the Nerge brand. As you can see, it says Nerge. And these have a really nice, solid brass fitting screw system. These right now are my favorite hoops. I just started using these. They were recommended by the Joy-Filled Stitcher, and you can find these at Joann Fabrics. I ended up buying these online at Joann Fabrics because they didn't have them in stock, but they shipped really quickly, and I'm sure that some like more urban Joann Fabrics would have them in stock. And these are listed as premium wood hoops or premium beech wood hoops. I'll put a link down below. This one, I don't know the brand. It has this on the bottom. I got this from Jessica Long Embroidery online. I like supporting small businesses, and she has these and I really like them. This was probably the most expensive hoop, which was like $8. These are really good, but the reason why I like this one better than this one is because this one isn't doing it, but if you notice these rivets right here on one of my other hoops, it's kind of pulling up a bit. And so it kind of loses tension. So those are the two wooden hoops that I really like. And these are the ones I use to work with. One thing about these wooden hoops is that you need a screwdriver to get them really tight. On the end, you want to just get a flathead screwdriver. Some of them are Phillips head as well. I think it's like the A.E. Edwards brand, which I think are similar to this too. If I'm wrong, I'll let you know, or I'll cut this out. But the A.E. Edwards brand of hoops are also very good. And I think I have some of those as well, but they're in a project. I also have a plastic hoop that I really like, and this is a Loops and Threads plastic hoop just from Michaels. And this is a really inexpensive hoop. It's nice because it has a really large nut that you can loosen by hand and you can tighten it by hand really nicely. This is the kind of hoop that has a ridge in the middle. That ridge in the middle keeps my fabric really, really tight. And these come in lots of fun colors and they're inexpensive and you can kind of get them anywhere. So I really like these plastic hoops. So my recommendation for a working hoop, and this is just my opinion, is one of these 3 hoops because they keep the tension so nice. They don't slide around as much. And I like a really tight fabric. And I use them basically interchangeably. All I worry about is the size when I choose a size. And I'll talk about size at the end too, size of hoops at the end as well. So let's talk about working hoops that I don't love and why I don't love them. I have a whole stack of working hoops that I don't love. This is a hoop that I had 3D printed. And it is great for tension, but it's very, very small. And not only is it very small, but it's also very thick. It's very thick, and so it's hard to get your needle in where it needs to be. And when I finish my hoop, I kind of weave in the ends. And this is, goodness, what is that? I mean, that's like an inch, 3/4 of an inch or an inch. And it's hard for me to weave it in. It's also very small, so I would only use this for very small pieces. But it does have great tension, and it screws together. So this is kind of a iffy one that I kind of like, but only on special occasions, essentially. So let's talk about the ones that I really kind of don't like. I have 2 plastic ones. This is a clover, I think. Yeah, this is a clover hoop that I got at Joann Fabrics. And it's okay. I actually might want to try it again and see if I like it more now. But the main issue is that it's so smooth, right? This is so smooth and shiny that the fabric just slides. So maybe if I rough it up, I may do like an update on this hoop because it does get nice and tight and it has a nice, and you can tighten it really easily by hand, which is nice, but it's very smooth. So this may also be like an iffy one. This here, and I'll talk about wrapped hoops in a bit, but this is a wrapped hoop and it is just a standard bamboo hoop that you get at Michael's or Joann's or wherever, right? This is just a normal bamboo hoop. And I took the inside and I wrapped it in bias tape. And I did this because these bamboo hoops are good enough, but again, don't keep it taut enough. And I saw on YouTube someone was wrapping their hoops and that really helped them. And it did, it worked much better, but it doesn't work as well as the thicker hoops because this metal piece just bends. And so it just doesn't keep taut. This is a small plastic hoop that also comes from Michael's and it's the Hoopla brand. And this, I haven't even opened it. I'll open it. This basically just like slides out. And I honestly, it just does not get tight enough at all. It just kind of slides out the back. So this brand does not work at all for me. And in fact, I had one in this brand, and this again is the Hoopla. Yeah, the Susan Bates Hoopla brand, which is sold right next to the Loops and Threads brand at Michael's. But go for Loops and Threads. It has the round outside and the kind of brass nut, and don't go for this one. I actually bought one of these and threw it away because it was so worthless to me that I couldn't even stand it anymore. And I literally bought this little one for this video. So that's that. And then finally, I have this hoop here, which is a metal and plastic spring hoop. And I really wanted to like this hoop. But it just did not keep my fabric tight enough. It's possible that I wasn't using it correctly and maybe I need to watch some videos, but I did not love this one and it's hard to find anyway, so I don't recommend this one. So those are the hoops that I don't love, like the hoops that I bought for working that I don't love. Now let's talk about framing hoops. People do stitch in these framing hoops. There's nothing wrong with stitching in the hoops that I'm about to show you. They come in most embroidery kits. You can get them really cheap. They're really available. And it means you don't have to re-hoop your piece after you're done embroidering it. The standard hoop is just the bamboo hoop that I showed you before. And these are just hoops. Some of them have a nut here, some of them don't. This one doesn't. And they are good enough. There's nothing wrong with them. They do sometimes have a little bit of sand them down. And what I found is like the wooden hoops really need to be sanded or else they'll catch on things. But the bamboo hoops are usually pretty good. And these you can find anywhere. These are like the standard hoops. You can buy them on Amazon for really cheap in bulk. You can buy them at Joann's, at Hobby Lobby, at Michael's. You can buy them everywhere. And these are great because you can paint and stain them. So here's one that I've stained and sealed, and they just make really nice frames for your embroideries. And as you can see, all of my embroideries are framed. Almost all my embroideries are framed in these hoops. That's why I get these. I get these for framing purposes. They're also cheap. So you can make them look really classy by painting them. So this one's painted black. This one's painted red. That one was stained. And you can make them look really classy and like zhuzh them up a bit, but they're also cheap. And so if you are selling embroidery or if you're gifting embroidery, the frame just doesn't cost very much, which is really nice. The other kind of hoop that I use for framing is this like flexi hoop. And Shiloh in X Stitch MD stitches in these hoops. And these are like rubbery on the outside, and then there's just a plastic kind of inner hoop, and they just fit together. And they're great because they come with a little hangy thing. And you can actually get these in different colors, although they're hard to find. Most of them are this wood grain, but I got a whole bunch of different colors on eBay, and sometimes you can find them at like Joann's in different colors, but usually you're going to find this wood grain. And this piece right here is framed in one of these. I don't like stitching on these because I can't adjust the tension and it's just not enough tension. But something to remember is that I stitch on a much thinner fabric than and a much softer fabric than most cross stitch fabrics. That's definitely something to keep in mind. And also embroidery fabrics, at least the stuff that I stitch on, and I'll have another video about fabrics like I said, but what I stitch on is just like fabric that you buy off the bolt at Joann's. You don't need special fabric for freehand embroidery like you do with cross stitch, and cross stitch fabric is blocked out, right? There's no stretch to it at all. Whereas embroidery fabric may have a little bit of give because it hasn't been blocked. Even if it's a non-stretch woven fabric, it may still have a little bit of stretch. So those are the main hoops that I use in my stitching. I have, like I said, specific ones that I use for the stitching part that I really like, but the framing part can really be any kind of a hoop, which is nice. Now, I did mention that some people wrap their hoops, and I have two wrapped hoops. I have this one, and then I have another wrapped hoop. I have one of my thicker hoops that I've wrapped in twill tape. And you might want to wrap your hoop for a couple reasons. Number one, it prevents the gaps, right? The fabric fills in the gaps that prevent it being as tight as it could possibly be. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that it rounds and softens the inner hoop, which means that if you're working on a delicate fabric, it's less likely to damage your fabric. It also doesn't leave as distinct a mark on your fabric that you have to get out later. So best practices says you should take out your hoop every time you are done stitching. I do not do that. In fact, my embroideries live in the hoops until they're done or until I have to move the hoop, because I don't want any barriers to having to put things together and rehoop things to stitch. I just want to sit down and stitch. So I keep them in. But for delicate fabric, I try to use a wrapped hoop. Well, I also try to take it out on delicate fabric. I try to be a good embroidery citizen. But so wrapping hoops is something that you might want to do depending on your fabric, depending on what hoop you're going to do. So this hoop here is better for stitching than, for me anyway, than a bamboo hoop without the wrapping. And finally, I just want to talk about size. I have all different sizes of hoops, and you need to pick the size that fits your hands the best and that's most comfortable for you. And also that fits the size of the project that you're doing. This hoop is actually my favorite size. It's 7 inches. I really like 7 inches. It just fits perfectly for me. Unfortunately, it's hard to find a 7-inch hoop, and so I usually use 6-inch hoops or 8-inch hoops, depending on the size of the project. You always want at least, if possible, you want at least an inch or two around the outside of your pattern to give yourself space to stitch. I don't always do that because if I'm doing an 8-inch pattern, I'm not going to use a 10-inch hoop. It's just too unwieldy for me. I just can't do it. But my mom has very small hands, and so for her, I think a 6-inch hoop would be best because she has smaller hands. If you have larger hands and you have a larger reach, like if you have like piano playing hands, you can use a larger hoop that will feel comfortable for you. So what I recommend that you do is test out a couple hoop sizes, test out a couple hoop brands, and see what you think. For me, the way I like my fabric when I'm stitching may not be the same way that you like your fabric when you're stitching, and it's really a personal preference. But these are my recommendations, and I hope that this was helpful. And I think I'll stop talking. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help. I'll post links to all of my favorite hoops down below. I hope the groundhog tells you that it will be cold or warm, depending on what you prefer. And with all that being said, please take care of yourselves and have a good one. Bye.